welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome John, welcome Simon, welcome Esther, welcome the Amplitude team in Paris and in Santa Barbara, California, where you are now, John. We are very happy to start the new webinar season at the Product Crew with you guys, Amplitude, who just opened a new office in Paris. I'm gonna just introduce this really quickly. This talk. In the meantime, please tell us inside the chat room what you do at which company and which product analytics tool you use. That's very important for us. So thank you, John, for being with us. We are going to learn more about the North Star framework as a strategic tool and as an HR tool and much more. John, you are right now a product evangelist at Amplitude. You formerly worked at Zendesk and Pendo, and you often speak about analytics, product analytics subjects such as the vanity metrics, North Star, and data product management. You also have a great newsletter that we love in here and that we're going to share. And this talk is going to take us 45 minutes, maybe a little bit more. We're going to have like something like 30 to 40 minutes of talk, and right after we're gonna jump into the questions. So in the meantime, you can ask your question inside the chat room so that we have them in advance. I see that up. All right, so I'm gonna take maybe 20 minutes to talk, 20 seconds to talk about the Product Crew. Some of you know about us, some of you don't. We are a community. We started in the product ecosystem and then jumped into the design ecosystem, and now we are moving into the data ecosystem in France, but not only. Our purpose is really to unlock the potential of our members, and the way we do that is by giving you tools and methodologies to progress, by connecting you with top profiles, giving workshops, live webinars, and really useful tools, and boosting your career through hiring, what we call hiring sprints or open candidates. This is our main product, and this is the way we match you with top tech companies. We have the chance to have partnered with 400 tech companies so far that you can see some of them in here, and subscribing into our one of our hiring sessions can lead you to up to 15 matches really quickly. You have the link in here, and we're gonna send you all the links, the necessary links into the chat room. In the meantime, please, you can please introduce yourself inside the chat room and give us your favorite product analytics tool. Thank you very much for having listened to me. And John, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself.
Sure. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great.
Great.
Great to meet everyone. Very excited to be doing this event. Thanks for the intro. Super brief introduction about myself before going into the particular talk. So I'm a product evangelist at Amplitude. I have a background in product management and UX across a number of companies. What does a product evangelist do? It ranges from one-on-one product therapy sessions, basically, with our customers. Product leader needs some help, I go and help them. And it ranges from that to future customers, helping them, and then writing playbooks, and then doing the coaching and the workshops that we do. So it's a very interesting job, but my heart is always in product. And so that's why I love talking about these things. let's jump in so we leave a lot of times for questions. And thank you again for doing this. And so hopefully soon I can visit France, and that would be a fun way to do this activity as well. Great. Let's see how far we can get with the technologies. All right. Hopefully you can see my screen. Okay. Making strategy accessible. Okay, good. We've got some good things. So let's just jump into the topic. The topic today is making strategy accessible with the North Star framework. One thing about me is I never think there's one right framework or way to do things. So the beauty of the North Star framework is as a teaching tool. And whether you adapt it or combine it with other frameworks, we've found at Amplitude, it's a very good way to learn about data and strategy and product. And then maybe you can use it. We use it at Amplitude, so it's certainly something you could try. Great. So what problems, we're all product folks here, so we should start with the problem we're trying to solve before we jump into any type of solution. What problems does the North Star framework attempt to address? In about 2016, I wrote a blog post called Signs That You're Working in a Feature Factory, and people that connected with lots of people. We don't want to work in a feature factory. We don't want to just build and not sure if anything works. I would say that there's another side of the problem, which is that many companies are becoming data driven, but they're driving in data circles. You know, they're just driving around and optimizing and doing these things. And we don't want that either. We want to keep the big picture in mind, and we want to work and experiment at the same time. So that's one of the problems. We're trying to find the balance between those worlds, between ship, don't worry about anything, and then just running in data circles. It doesn't matter what we're doing. It's not strategically aligned. So we want to find the middle between those. The next thing we want to do is make the product strategy accessible. I always joke that a product manager's work is never done. You know, you write 3 bullets, someone wants 5 bullets. You write 5 bullets, they want 3 pages. You write 3 pages, they want 60 pages. You give them 60 pages, they say, why didn't you give me 3 bullets? And then this is the game of product all the time. You can never find the right level. And so it's important to find ways to make product strategy accessible for the team. And things like OKRs they're okay, but they're not strategy, and OKR is not strategy. So it's important to be able to think about how to make product strategy accessible. And then finally, I think that these are 2 of the same ideas below. We want long-term success and have actionable things we can work on. I think we've all worked in an environment where, I'm going to joke, anyone on the Amplitude team in sales are thinking about it. I mean, there's many ways you can make the quarter, but kill the year or kill the decade, right? There's many ways to get short-term results at the expense of long-term results. And at the same time, there's many times to create long-term results, but just be going in circles in the thing. So we want to set ourselves up for long-term success and then have influence. And these are some things that the North Star framework addresses. But enough talking about the theory. Let's just jump into a thought exercise for everyone. I learned in the prep for this call that soccer is life and death in France. So the idea that we have pictures of kids having fun and parents maybe is not so much, maybe it's a lot more aggressive than this. But I want you to imagine that there is a product that helps youth sports coordinate their activities, like their coaching sessions, their games, lets their scores. This is a real product in the world. I don't know if there's one version of it in France, but it helps these parents effectively manage the league. Another way to say it. Of course, if it is life and death, it's probably the parents are, reprimanding their kids, but that's okay. Okay, so I want you to imagine you're the product manager of this particular company, and you can choose between 3 metrics. One, you can just count the number of active users. So how many coaches, how many parents, how many kids? That's one option. The next option is that you could think of revenue. Maybe you have to pay a little bit after the free trial and then you need to renew. So you could just count the amount of money going in place. Or you can count the number of what I will call super youth soccer or football coaches. And so these are the coaches that are managing the team. They're raising money for the team. In the United States, it's a big fundraising. Anyone in youth sports has to raise a lot of money for the teams. There's promotion, they're adding the content and the scores. Basically, if the dream of your product strategy came true, this is what it looks like. All these behavioral actions, all these things in your product, that's success. So you're the product manager, and you have to choose between which one of these metrics you want to put up on a screen every week. So maybe in the chat, let us know which one you would put up on the screen every week. Okay, I don't have time to check the chat, but I will assume that you'll learn from each other to do these particular things. Okay, so I've run this activity a lot over the years, and it's not so easy. But this is kind of what develops as people do this problem. So first of all, is if they are accepting money early, revenue could be too leading. So we're going to say this is too leading, right? Now, daily active users, it feels okay. People are active in the product, but it doesn't tell us anything about whether the strategy is working. So this is a little bit problematic. Now, super youth soccer coaches starts to feel good, but it feels a little bit lagging. It feels like you can't quite control it. And then revenue, the renewals, feels too lagging. This feels very lagging. Okay, so this feels good. Super youth soccer coaches feels good. It feels a little out of reach. Revenue feels lagging. And this is the challenge that we have. But 9 times out of 10, when I do this exercise, people agree that super youth soccer coaches feels good. You're going to go home to your, significant other and say, I work at a company that's trying to empower these coaches to be great. And so it feels good. It feels right. But it leaves a little bit of questions about what you should put off to the side. So this is, in effect, explaining the problem the North Star framework solves, and then also gives you an idea of how it could work. So the challenge then, if we agree that super youth soccer coaches would make a good North Star metric, then the question is, well, what do the teams work on? And this is the most important part of this particular framework. So you can see here, this is the real activity this team in the world did. So they asked themselves, our ability to succeed is a function of our ability to make youth sports coaching fun, accessible, efficient. And they started to break down the levers of the formula. So in this case, they decided they needed to make it very easy to onboard coaches into the app and parents. They also agreed that part of the app's power at the end of the day is that you have to be able to schedule and coordinate lots of people, scheduling coordination. And then they agreed, really these apps are largely about coordination and communication. It's about the parent talking to the coach talking to the kid talking to the coaches talking to coaches. So it's very important for there to be effective messaging to make this work. And then the crux, this company will not be profitable unless they figure out a growth engine. So the growth engine for this company is the ability to grow across the league, right? So one coach says to the other coach, hey, if you download the app, it's going to make it much easier for our teams to play the sport. Oh, okay, I'll download the app. And so there is a kind of growth thesis built into this. So what we're doing here is we're taking this North Star metric and we're breaking it up into levers that are more actionable. Which then, and actually, if you want to follow along, the organizers can paste the link to this Miro in the chat so you can follow along if that's easier for you, or you can look at these things. So what we get at the end of this is what we would call the North Star framework. A lot of people say, well, it's about one metric, the North Star metric. That's not correct. The North Star framework is about picking one metric called the North Star metric, that's this one right here, which is inspiring. It's a little bit lagging from the actions of the team, but if we see this metric go up over time, we're going to increase our confidence that the product strategy is working. And then the team picks what are called inputs. And so this input might be around messaging effectiveness. You could imagine some metrics there. Scheduling and coordination, you could imagine some metrics there. And the coaching and onboarding. And then we have this mystery grow across the league. Are they going to start a new growth team? I don't know. They better call Elena and then they can hook them up. We The growth team then can purchase Amplitude, and then everything will be great. Okay, so the point here is when I say the North Star framework, what I'm referring to is the North Star metric, and then the selection of input metrics that together form like a value algorithm for the product. It's like a value formula. Now, when I show this to people, they say, well, where does the roadmap go? Where do OKRs go? Where does all that stuff go? And you can still do all those things. So take our very friendly team here. I like that hat. You know, this doesn't stop the team saying we've got ideas and we're going to try things and we're going to try, and maybe even they have OKRs. They say by the next quarter, we want to try to move this metric up by a certain percentage. All those things remain the same. But, and this is the key, their work, they can see how their work contributes to the hypothesis of the product strategy working. How many of us have worked in a company where we're working, but we say, what's the big picture here? You know, or we work in a company that shows the super slides of the year plan, and we're like, well, I don't see how my work fits in. So the key part of the North Star framework is that these teams have something they can focus on, and that this is considered to be a driver of another metric, which we believe is a leading indicator of business results. And this is itself connected to sustained growth. This is the hypothesis. I'll leave you with one interesting idea before we move to some other slides. You know, we could say what we want about Amazon, but I love this quote. If you have the Miro board, you can read the whole thing. But it's from 2010, and Jeff Bezos says that that year they had 452 detailed goals. But 360 of the 452 were directly impacting customer experience. They had an input. It was related to customer experience. They don't mention the word revenue or just 8 times revenue. They use other words like operating profit, and those things are not mentioned once in that particular goal. The key part is this idea of controllable inputs being the heart of product, meaning that to have a data-informed product operation, your teams need to come to work with a clear input that they can focus on that is then connected to long-term results. Great. Hopefully this is making some sense as I present it. We're going to go through, we want to make sure we have a lot of time for questions. Okay, now that I've given you an example of the Super Sports League, let's get into a little bit of theory so you understand what's going on. Anytime people come into work in software, there's some ticket in Jira or something. You know, it's at the end of the day, if no one had anything to work on today, everything would explode in the company. Oh my God, we have to have something to work on. Okay. Now, at the same time, you probably have all seen the special presentation 2023, the strategy of the company. And so somewhere in the company, you have these series of bullets in the special presentation, 3 nice bullets, and you think, I understand it. So more of the theory here, what is the North Star framework doing? The North Star framework is connecting, let's just say that this is a box over here. It's connecting the work to a real product strategy. This is the missing link in many companies. The missing link is that the teams come into work every day and work on something. And the business has its goals and it wants the revenue and it wants all these things, but there's no connection between the parts. So I like to draw it this way for maybe for it to click for you. What we're doing is we're creating a set of inputs here that drive the North Star here. And this is what creates the connection. So maybe this alternate view of thinking about it, maybe will help it click what we're doing. You've got the work and the opportunities and the things you're focusing on. You've got that business strategy. The North Star framework is like the glue between these particular worlds. So drawing it down here, you can see this is aligned, right? Same idea. Team has their experiments, they've got their board, they've got, of course, they've got Amplitude because it's very helpful. They've got all sorts of things working here. And those experiments impact the inputs, which we just described, which impact the North Star metric, which is customer-centric, captures the strategy. It's fairly stable. So like at Amplitude, we recently went public, but since I joined 4 years ago, our North Star metric has not changed. And the inputs have not changed. Now, you might look at that and say, well, my goodness, how could that possibly be? Every year we have a new strategy. That's because most strategies are tactics. Most yearly changes are not impacting the underlying strategy of the company. So we're a pretty big picture company, and we've stayed the course for our particular North Star. But that's one of the most important things here, is that these things stay stable, so that you're not every year or every quarter running through this big change of things. You know, oh my goodness, everything's changing. It keeps stable. And so that's like a very good element of those things. So hopefully this drawing makes sense. You know, sometimes my drawings on the left can be confusing, but then framing it this way can help you. Okay, let's get to some real world examples. Now you understand the idea, and we're going to get into more nuance. Get your product thinking hat going. Let's go. Okay. This is an example from a fintech company. And so the goal of this fintech company is to align your spending with what you care about. So their thesis is that if they can help people spend and invest their money in ways that match their interests, like environment or whatever, then they can be a successful bank. So how did we do the North Star framework with this team? This one was very easy. I asked the team, what are parts of the value puzzle? That's all. So I asked the team, and you can see they answer with things like, well, direct deposit and savings, and we need to acquire customers, and we want to handle their budgets and their pain. So this is the first part of any North Star framework workshop, is just brainstorming the parts of the value puzzle without thinking too much or censoring what your thoughts are. So you can see they, and you can start to see some hints. They say primary bank. You can see a question mark there. That's an interesting part of this. What happened next? Well, they grouped these things. If you group these things, we all love grouping sticky notes, especially in Miro. That seems to be what the last 3 years about, is essentially grouping sticky notes in Miro for the rest of our lives. But you can see the groupings of these things. So some of the sticky notes were related to funding. Some were related to what we call integrating into the financial life. This company wants to become part of all your financial life. They want to get charged as much money as possible because they believe in their cause. They want to change the world and help people. You know, it's a good bank, right? And then there's a cluster around acquiring customers, acting on insights, reliability, reputation. And then you can see here that they start to form the idea of the North Star. Primary bank. Do we really want to be their prime? That's hard to be your primary bank. You know how hard it is for a new upstart fintech company to become your primary bank? It's challenging. It's inspiring for this company. It's hard. You know, you want to keep your bank, and then you have your fintech app, and you don't put any of your money into it. So that's a challenging idea. What do they do next? You can see them clarifying their ideas. And this is one of the most important parts of the North Star framework. Powerful ideas first, then measurement. Not what do we have to track, and then powerful ideas. So maybe I'm overconfident because at Amplitude, we help people measure things really, really well. And so I don't care as much about measurement. But if you start with a powerful idea, usually there's a way to measure. So you can see that they're clarifying their thoughts. We want to be their primary bank. How do we become their primary bank? We need to help them fund their accounts effectively. We need to help them understand and act on insights. We need to integrate into their financial life. So, you know, Pauline goes and invests money. Well, we want to be there. Pauline goes and has a budget for savings. We want to make sure that we control that. Control is a bad word, but you get the idea. We want to be as trustworthy as other banks, because have you noticed these fintech companies, they try so much for all the features and you're like, I don't trust you. Like, you haven't given me a chance to trust you. You need to be trustworthy, and they need to acquire customers at or below market rates. When we did this workshop, the CFO said, I don't care how good for the world we're going to be. If we can't acquire customers at market rates or below, we will not have a business. So, all right. Okay. So they have to acquire customers. Then at the end, they focus on measurement. So they add the current hypothesis for the measurement. So you can see here where their primary bank, if they deposit their money, how funding effectiveness is the time to fund the amount. Financial life integration is the number of product areas they're using, et cetera, to do those things. I love this example because it shows the core concept, the value puzzle, focusing on powerful ideas, and then at the end, adding a layer of measurement. Why do we do it this way? Because if we started with measurement, you're liable to get a North Star which doesn't inspire your team. Do you notice here that if let's just say Esther from the Amplitude team, I said, Esther, I want you to join my company. We're here to change the world by allowing a new type of bank, which is going to move as much of your money to the things you care about. It's going to change the world and help you and be a good bank. Is that interesting? She's like, yes, that's great. And then I say, and it's the function of effectiveness, et cetera, and I go through that. We start with the powerful idea first so that we make sure that it works before adding the measurement. Okay, so I have another example, but in the interest of time, we might come back to this one. I leave this example for you. The one thing I want to explain, I'll actually do this example very quickly. I'll set the story. I get a call from the head of marketing for a large e-commerce company. And she said, John, we need the North Star framework. And I said, that's interesting. You're the marketing director. Why do you need the North Star framework? Because I don't know if my marketing's working. What do you mean? You have your metrics and things like that. No. I'm worried that I'm acquiring customers that are not the most valuable customers for the company. That I'm bringing customers in that aren't going to become long-term successful customers. I want to unite the teams across the company. So we did a workshop with them. And this is an e-commerce product, and you can get the idea. But the most critical point here is that the way the company used to operate was like this, silos. They used to get together in the beginning of the year and say, marketing, what's your goal? Logistics, what's your goal? Loyalty team, what's your goal? And they had different goals, but they didn't come together in a way that allowed them to drive their product strategy. It was almost like it was like different worlds. Marketing team, different worlds. All these boxes were a different world. By agreeing on a North Star, so they came up with 2 ideas for their North Star. I have to change every product, so I called it Acme Fishing. It's fishing. It's not fishing, basically, but it's a sport. It's some kind of thing. They decided that they wanted to count the number of people who are returning to their product, engaging with the deals, having fun, and receiving their products in a healthy way. Once they decided that, all these different silos went away. The marketing team could say, you know what? Yes, I want to drive and acquire users, but if they're not going to eventually become this, that's not who we're trying to acquire. The people who ran the events said, we can run a successful event, but if it doesn't relate to this, then it's not a successful event. The logistics team said, we can run a successful event and ship you your product, but if we're not shipping the product in a way that relates to this, it's not going to be a good candidate for a thing. So hopefully you see how this works. It's this idea that the company was able to focus on a single idea that made the silos between the parts of the organization go away. Okay, we're getting deeper. Hopefully you're getting the idea of what we're doing. So there's a couple ways that I can take this now. I'm interested, how are we doing on time? Let's see if we're doing decent on time. Moving along. Okay. So what we have found in Amplitude doing hundreds of these workshops is that pretty much most North Stars start to look like this. Either a count of accounts, if you're in B2B with certain behaviors, so that would be called transform small businesses or healthy marketing teams, etc. So it's the count of accounts with some behaviors. The second one is a count of human beings with certain behaviors. So at Amplitude, our North Star metric is called weekly learning users. And that's a count of human beings that have certain characteristics. The next pattern is a count of key value producing or generating actions. So for a while at Spotify, they had a North Star of basically premium minutes. Why? It's not a count of humans, should have been humans. That didn't matter to them because they wanted to count the amount of music being consumed by premium subscribers. So it's a key value action. The final one is count of interactions between humans. So a good example here would be like a music app that is for artists and listeners. And maybe they count the healthy relationships between humans, the artists, and the person that do it. So once this clicked, it only clicked for me after I did 75 North Star workshops. Like, I kept doing more and more of these, and I'm like, well, at the end of the day, you're going to pick one of these patterns. So one thing you could do right now, thinking about your company, is what's the best fit? Is it a count of accounts, or you in B2B? Is it a count of human beings that have certain behaviors? Is it the count of some value producing action, something that they're doing that exchanges value? Or is it the count of interactions between human beings, like in a multi-sided market that you might exist? So you could think about that for a second. And if you decide on this, actually a lot of the thinking, you're good on a lot of the thinking. Once we did that, and it has been, I think, about 170 workshops now, there's been a lot. What I started to notice is that the inputs also have patterns. So for example, in many products, it's the breadth of use. So how breadth across the features, the depth of use, how deeply they use the product, and then how often they use the product. That's an example. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I want you to, if you have access to the mirror board, they can share the link again. You could think to yourself, what type of company do we have? Are we a sort of content creation type product? Are we trying to, are we a collaboration product where it's about collaboration and data maybe? Are we a learning type product where people start as beginners and become intermediates and then experts? I'll leave you to decide what's the right input pattern for you, but I've included this here so you can have more access to these things. But the big story here, when I show you these patterns, is that the patterns are easy. Getting it perfect is the hard part. You know, the difference between, so for example, at Amplitude, we could have used something like weekly querying users. So back to this thing, we could have said, we could be WQU, which would be weekly querying users. But that doesn't match our strategy. Our strategy is not to, in fact, with a lot of B2B products, you're unsuccessful if someone's using it a lot. You want someone to get what they want out of the product and get the learning out of the product and then do their job. You don't want them using your product all the time. Maybe Miro wants us to use the product all the time, but you get the idea. Miro is a customer, by the way. I love that team. I love using their product, and I've done a North Star workshop for them using Miro, which is so funny. Okay, so our North Star metric turned out to be weekly learning users, because these are users who are sharing the insights with other people. And that's a good segue into this next example. So I can talk about Amplitude all day. So now I'm giving you a very detailed example of a real B2B SaaS company in the data space. So our North Star metric at Amplitude is called weekly learning users. And the definition itself are people who are active, they're sharing their learnings, and the learnings are being consumed by other people. The joke I use like on a team is like, I create a chart and I send it to Simone on my team, and he never looks at it. It's like a tree falling in the forest. No one is there to hear it. How many dashboards does your company create that no one ever looks at them? It's terrible, right? So we wanted to make this North Star for us challenging, that it needs to be shared and consumed by other people. So that's our North Star metric. And then from there, we have 3 inputs. So we need to activate our accounts, meaning we need to get data into the system. We need to get them comfortable with our product. And then we need to empower what we would call the producers. So these are the people who produce the insights that the organization often consumes. In most products, it's like 80, 20, 70, 30. 30% of your users are the ones who create a lot of content. 70% are the people who do a lot of consuming of that content. And so these are, I send Pauline and I broadcast a learning to Pauline, and Pauline looks at it, that's a broadcasted learning. And then consumption of learnings is the rest of the people in the company consume that particular learning, meaning Pauline sends it to, Mehdi on that side, and then Mehdi checks it out and shares it with the team. That's a consumption of learning. So you can see when you look at this, this is one I could talk about all day because it's my own company, so there's no confidentiality problem there. You can see how this represents our strategy. And when a team comes to work at Amplitude, they have something to focus on. So as an example, this is a real bet. We had a bet that one of the teams wanted to present interesting charts immediately during the onboarding flow. That bet was connected to the activation of accounts. So you see there's some metrics here that they could pick from. And they also wanted to instrument that bet, right? So they wanted to, their success was interactions with the charts, the 7-day retention on that chart. But I wanted to show you this about how real world work connects to the North Star. What this meant is that this team had a very easy time doing their OKRs. Why? They didn't need to think about it anymore. They knew why they were doing their work, right? They're doing the work to influence activated accounts. And so you can see here how the OKR was produced. So hopefully we're getting more and more complex as we go through this activity, but hopefully you're starting to incorporate some of the particular ideas. I'll end with, let's see, 37, and then so we'll just wrap up soon to do this. I'll end with one thought here, and I'm going to show you something that will scare you. So whenever I talk about this, they say, you know, people say, we got to keep it simple. We got to keep it simple. Now, or they'll be in a very complex business and they'll say, North Star framework doesn't work with us because we are a complicated business. This is about as unsexy a business as you can get. It's construction project management. This is a big company. It's multi-billion-dollar company. And the point here is that when you understand the concept behind North Star, sometimes you have a North Star and a set of inputs and another set of inputs that relate to here, right? There's no rule that says you only need 2 levels. There's no rule that only says you have to do this. The most important thing is that this made sense to that team. That's what you're trying to shoot for with the North Star framework. Because what is this about? It is that the team that is coming to work doing the My Tasks feature knows that their work is there to decrease response times, and that response times will decrease the duration of the completed workflows. And if you can decrease the number of duration of completed workflows, you will improve the speed of the workflow execution. And if you do that correctly, you will make the number of healthy completed workflows go up. And if you do that correctly, you will add to complete healthy projects. And if you do that correctly, this is confidential, they're a company, North Star, but if you do that correctly, they'll improve this. That's what it's all about. It doesn't matter if you have 3 levels or 2 levels or whatever. It's literally you're creating confidence on the team that the work is connected to the strategy. And so with that, you know, I'd love to jump to some questions that people have. I had a couple more slides you could look at. Nothing all that special that can't be described in this particular thing, but hopefully that was a good deep dive into the North Star framework. And so you could see it doesn't matter how complex your business is. It doesn't matter how many moving parts there are. It's about creating a hypothesis around value that links the work of your teams to something that matters on the long term. And so with that, I will stop sharing. Happy to answer some questions.
Thank you, John. That was really insightful, a really great deep dive. I hope you people liked it as much as I did, and the other people from our team at TPC. I just received a lot of great Slack messages about your talk. So we're gonna jump on a quick Q&A session.
Sure.
We have some questions in here. You can. If you are still attending,
too. Do you want me to
yeah, you can see them too.
Nice,
you can
okay.
still ask your questions if you want. If you're still participating,
Yeah,
we have 15 minutes.
Through the open questions and just add them there. Does that sound good?
That's great. We have Rania that asked us, what's the difference between the North Star metric and the vision/mission?
Yeah. So remember what I said about the North Star. There is, I think McKinsey for a while had this thing called the North Star. North Star is not a new idea. Like every consulting company has come up with some kind of North Star. You need a word that describes big and vision, the North Star thing. The big difference is the vision and the mission tells me nothing about connectivity. There's no connectivity in a vision and mission. And in fact, the best visions are pretty lofty and big and focusing in that particular way. So, you know, at Amplitude, you know, we want to help the world build better products. You know, our mission is to do that. Does that mean something? Yes, it absolutely means something. But you'll notice it doesn't create this actionable framework. And that's the problem, actually. How many companies go in and that year they say, the 2023 goal vision is this. And then they jump immediately to, and Team X, exactly what's on your roadmap, feature by feature? What are you going to build? You notice how much space is wrong between there is missing? It goes from the biggest vision down to exactly what you're going to deliver quarter by quarter. That doesn't create outcome centricity. That doesn't allow teams to experiment. That doesn't allow teams to test and learn. So the North Star framework is the connective glue between those particular things. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes lots of sense, and it makes your strategy actionable. It makes you move. But how do you avoid the North Star network, on the contrary, being limiting, especially for complex global products? Would you do like different North Star for different groups? That's a question that's been asked by Rosendo in here.
Nice. Here's a way to think about it. Reality is reality. So then it comes down to what version of reality are you going to be? So what I mean by this is I've done these in large banks, and they come in, they say, well, we've got 300 products. We can't do North Star framework. And I'll say, do you really have 300 products? Yes. Checking account 1, checking account 2, checking account 3, mobile front end team 1, mobile back end team 2. Then we've got the commercial division A, commercial division B, and they go through their 300 products. They don't have 300 products. They've got 4 human beings in the world they're trying to help: institutions, regular day bankers, and commercial banking situations, right? So the one thing I say is that one problem is what many teams do is they start with their org chart and they say, well, every team, we must have 75 North Stars because we've got the team, we've got 75 teams. You notice what's happened there is they've let the structure of their company dictate the strategy, not the strategy dictate the structure of their company.
Yeah.
That's a big accident. So whenever someone says they've got I agree that I showed you a complex product. I showed you a automation product sitting within a large construction project management company that there's probably another 30 of those particular divisions, but every division goes up to the product North Star. So if they can do it, probably you can do it. I would say one thing, sometimes a company has legitimately different products.
So here in
Sometimes
France,
the company has product X, product Y, product Z. I would even warn you there too. How many people work for a fast growing B2B SaaS company and they say we're multi-product company now? But if you step back, you're like, no, these are value-added services. It really is one product. You're packaging it as multiple products, but are they different human beings? No. Do they need to do different things? No. Is this part of the same idea? Yes. So you can challenge multi-product in many cases.
We've been talking a lot recently in the recent few years about the objective and key result, the OKRs, and lots of product teams have been moving with this strategic framework. And Julien is asking us, so if you have this framework in place, how do you introduce the North Star metric? Do you ditch the OKR, or is there any soft way to do it?
Yeah, this is great. The two things are absolutely complementary. In fact, the North Star framework will take your OKR practice amazing places to do the thing. And let me explain how to do those things. So remember what I was saying, the difference between persistent model and point in time goals. OKRs are a goal setting method. They're okay for strategy deployment, but let's say you had 100 OKRs sitting on the floor of your company. Maybe you could imagine what the strategy is, but they're not specifically a strategy deployment tool. They're sort of like, they're part of the strategy deployment tool chest, but they're not the only part of the puzzle to do those things. So the best way to think of it is how many people just lay out all the projects they want to do, and then OKRs are like, well, put an OKR at the end of every project that we want to do, right? So in that case, that's very difficult. What happens? A quarter, 61 business days, 90 days. It comes 10 days before the end of the quarter. They're like, oh my God, we didn't ship X, we didn't ship Y. Oh my goodness, we've got 3 projects. What, and it's this pain in the ass. Let's be honest. When you have a North Star framework, you don't have to rethink it. What's your team doing? Our team is trying to move that particular metric. you're going to be moving it for the next 4 quarters or 6 quarters or 8 quarters. Now, it doesn't mean that the bets that you try might not have specific metrics, but it really does help ground your OKR. So instead of going project first, goals second, you go model first, opportunities next, experiments third, goals last. Do you see the difference? Yeah. It's actually pretty mind-bending. It's mind-opening when you go that way, because it takes a lot of this like anxiety out of OKRs. It's pretty cool.
A question from Nicholas. I know lots of people have in here. The North Star needs to be stable to stay stable, but how do you make sure you have the right North Star metric? And if the North Star metric is not relevant anymore, what do you do?
Yeah, so here's a trick. Powerful idea, then measure, right? So sometimes you see a company get the right idea. Like I did something with a recent thing where they do something with car dealerships, and it's a data product for car dealerships. And once it clicked in their mind, this idea that they wanted these car dealerships to be achieving a certain, so their product basically did price optimization, and it requires a car dealership to stop thinking about moving the cars from the lot to getting the highest ROI for the assets that they have on the lot. Pretty cool product, right? But they had this idea of, and their North Star was kind of, this is gonna sound weird, was dealers who adopted the new philosophy. The hardest part in that business is to take a car dealer to stop thinking about moving the cars off the lot and start thinking about pricing optimization. I asked them, how many of these customers do you have right now? 10% of 100%. I'm like, okay, this is good. Well, you're going to be able to work on this for years. You're going to keep moving it up. Then they said, but we can't decide on the metric. We can't use this. And I said, that's not the problem. You have a powerful idea. If it's 80% or 75%, or if it's 30 days, or it's 15 days, or it's 5 days, like you could learn. All measurement is a hypothesis itself. How you measure is a hypothesis, that measurement is a correct predictive power, correlative power, forecasting power for what you're doing. So once they had the powerful idea that was strategically aligned, if in 1 year they decide to tweak the measurement, they can do that easily. They already have buy-in of the C-suite to use that particular metric. The second part of that is sometimes your strategy changes. How do you know to change your North Star? The people coming to work who are passionate problem solvers can't understand how that guides their decisions. You basically need to say to your team, the day you walk into work and these metrics and this North Star don't make sense anymore to you, then we have to change it. So that's like your signal. So basically your signal is when, and this happens maybe early stage startup begins to grow a little bit. It's like, look, we care more about just someone using the product now. We care about how they're using it. And then you switch the North Star and inputs as you do it.
That makes sense. So yeah. I got one last question. It's a personal one. It's something I think you know a little bit about. In the meantime, please, if you're still in here with us, send us your feedback and a rating over 5 inside the chat room.
In the Q&A, maybe we'll take those offline. I know that Paul, Rosendo, Benoit, Nicholas, maybe someone from my team will screenshot that and we'll get back
for sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna start a communication channel. So my question will be how Amplitude, the product analytic tool, can help us, think strategically, think within the North Star metric model.
Yeah. So the way to think about it is no customer cares about page views. No customer wants to be an active user. No human being in the world says, I love their product. I was an active user. I'm such an active user on those things, right? So the reason why you need Amplitude for these particular things is you really want to get to these granular exchanges of value, what you're doing with the product, the specific behavior that you're doing with the product. And that's where both you can look at that data to get some, there's 2 ways to think about the North Star. One is a math class and the other one is a strategy class. Now the math class idea is that you try to look at the data and you're like, well, what correlates and maybe what's a predictor? And Amplitude's very good at that. The other way is kind of the strategy class approach, which is what's our hypothesis? And then you maybe go back to the data and test it a little bit and say, I think there's a correlation there we might learn over time to be able to do it. The other thing is naturally, obviously, you want to run experiments, so you need A/B testing. So Amplitude does that, and then you want the teams to be able to collaborate on these metrics. So, for example, when a new employee joins, Amplitude has a notebooks feature that you could explain exactly how your North Star is calculated. So there's a lot of learning and collaboration that's involved with a particular product. But largely also, you don't want any product manager having to write 300 lines of SQL to get one retention curve. Like no analyst wants to do that, let alone any product manager to get the simple basic metric that they want. So, you make it, you don't have to write SQL. That's how it works.
Thank you very much, John. That's been very insightful.